Welcome to Unburied Remnants. The truth was never lost. It was buried. Let's dig in. Around 12,900 years ago, the world ended. Not for everyone, not all at once, but for the civilizations that existed on the edges of the ancient world, on the coastlines that are now 120 meters underwater. It was the end of everything they had known. We are not starting with the Bible. We are not starting with ancient texts. We are not starting with mythology or oral tradition. We are starting with the geological record, with ice cores, with sediment layers, with isotope analysis, with cosmological impact evidence that has been peer-reviewed and published in some of the most respected scientific journals on the planet. Because here is what almost nobody tells you about the flood traditions. The scientific case for a catastrophic global event in Earth's recent past is not a fringe position. It is mainstream geology. It is the accepted consensus. What is not mainstream, yet, is the full scale of what that event looked like. And that is what this episode is about. Part 1 is the geological and scientific case. We are going to follow the evidence before we follow the stories. The stories come in Part 2. To understand the scale of what happened, you need to understand what the world looked like before it. In 10,800 BC, approximately 12,800 years ago, the Earth was in the grip of the last glacial maximum. Enormous ice sheets covered North America to roughly the latitude of present-day New York. Northern Europe was under a kilometer of ice. Sea levels were approximately 120 meters lower than they are today. Think about what that means for the shape of the world. The Persian Gulf was largely dry land. The North Sea was a plain. Britain was connected to Europe. Indonesia was connected to mainland Southeast Asia. The continental shelves, which today are shallow underwater, were habitable land. There were roughly 30 to 40 million square kilometers of additional landmass available to human habitation. Coastlines that are now 120 meters underwater were, at that time, prime real estate. Flat, fertile, and close to fresh water from glacier melt. If any advanced human cultures existed in this period, we should expect them to have settled preferentially on those coasts. Which means that today, their remains would be underwater. We will come back to that in Part 2. For now, hold the image. A world whose coastlines look nothing like ours, and whose people were concentrated precisely where we can no longer easily look for them. Around 12,900 years ago, approximately 10,900 BC, something happened. The geological record shows an abrupt, dramatic temperature drop of between 10 and 15 degrees Celsius across the northern hemisphere. In decades, possibly years. The warm interglacial period that had been gradually ending was interrupted by a sudden return to glacial conditions that lasted approximately 1,200 years. This period is called the Younger Dryas. It is named after a cold-tolerant flower, Dryas octopetala, whose pollen appears in sediment layers from this period, at latitudes where it had no business growing. For most of the 20th century, the Younger Dryas was attributed to a disruption of ocean circulation patterns, the shutdown of the Atlantic meridional overturning circulation, triggered by a massive influx of cold, fresh water from melting glaciers. That hypothesis still has supporters. But in 2007, a team of 26 researchers published a landmark paper in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, proposing a different cause. And the evidence they presented was difficult to dismiss. They found a consistent black layer in sediment samples across multiple continents, a thin, dark stratum at precisely 12,900 years ago. In that layer, nanodiamonds, magnetic spherules, iridium anomalies, platinum concentrations, shocked quartz, helium-3 ratios consistent with extraterrestrial origin. These are the fingerprints of a cosmic impact, the same markers found at the Cretaceous-Paleogene boundary, the layer that marks the extinction of the dinosaurs 66 million years ago. The hypothesis? A fragmented comet or asteroid struck the North American ice sheet approximately 12,900 years ago, triggering catastrophic melting, releasing enormous quantities of fresh water into the North Atlantic, disrupting ocean circulation, and plunging the Northern Hemisphere into a sudden, deep freeze. The event is now known as the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis. And as of 2023, the evidence supporting it has been replicated at more than 50 sites across 6 continents.
An impact of this scale, striking an ice sheet rather than solid ground, would have had effects unlike any impact in the period of human civilization. The immediate effect: a superheated blast wave across a significant portion of North America. Wildfires on a continental scale. The combustion evidence: carbon-rich black matte deposits, elevated soot and charcoal layers, is found consistently across the continent at this boundary. The secondary effect: the destabilization of the Laurentide ice sheet. Billions of tons of ice and meltwater released in a geological instant. The meltwater poured into the North Atlantic and Arctic Oceans, disrupting the thermohaline circulation, the ocean current system that regulates temperature across the Northern Hemisphere. The disruption cooled the Atlantic and triggered the Younger Dryas cold period. The St. Lawrence Seaway region shows evidence of catastrophic flooding events. The channeled Scablands of Washington state, a vast landscape of dry riverbeds, coulees, and erratic boulders, hundreds of miles from any current water source, bear the unmistakable scars of floods of almost incomprehensible scale. The channeled Scablands were dismissed as a geological impossibility for decades. The geologist J. Harlan Bretz proposed in the 1920s that they had been carved by catastrophic flooding. His colleagues ridiculed him. Catastrophes, they said, were not scientific. Everything had to have a slow, gradual explanation. Bretz was eventually vindicated. The Scablands were indeed carved by catastrophic flooding, from the collapse of glacial Lake Missoula, which repeatedly burst through its ice dam and sent walls of water across the Northwest at speeds of up to 90 kilometers per hour. In 1979, nearly 50 years after he first proposed it, he received the Penrose Medal, geology's highest honor. He was 96 years old. The key lesson from Bretz's vindication: the geological record contains evidence of catastrophes that the scientific establishment resisted accepting, sometimes for decades, because they didn't fit the prevailing model of slow, gradual change. That lesson has direct relevance to the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, which is still being contested, and to what this episode is building toward. At 12,900 years ago, the Younger Dryas boundary, 35 genera of large mammals went extinct across North and South America. Mammoths, mastodons, giant ground sloths, American horses, camels, saber-toothed cats, American lions, short-faced bears. This was not a slow decline. The evidence shows rapid collapse at the same stratigraphic layer as the impact indicators. Mammoth populations in North America went from widespread to effectively zero within what appears in the fossil record to be a very short window. There is genuine scientific debate about the cause. The competing hypothesis is overkill, that human hunters, expanding into the Americas for the first time, hunted these animals to extinction. It is possible that both the impact and human hunting contributed. The debate has not been fully resolved. What is not in debate: the extinctions happened rapidly, at the Younger Dryas boundary, across an entire hemisphere. Whether the cause was primarily cosmic, primarily human, or both, the result was the same. A world that had been ecologically stable for tens of thousands of years was suddenly, catastrophically different. The Younger Dryas ended approximately 11,700 years ago. Again, abruptly. Ice cores from Greenland, show the temperature of the northern hemisphere rising by roughly 10 degrees Celsius in a period that some researchers estimate at as little as 3 years. 3 years. What followed, over the next several thousand years, was the most dramatic sea level rise in human memory. From approximately 10,000 BC to approximately 4,000 BC, global sea levels rose by roughly 120 meters as the remnant ice sheets melted. That is not a gradual, imperceptible rise. Coastal communities living at sea level in 10,000 BC would have experienced measurable inundation within a human lifetime. The rise was not uniform. It came in pulses, separated by periods of stability and then sudden jumps. Meltwater Pulse 1A, around 14,000 years ago, may have raised global sea levels by up to 20 meters in fewer than 500 years. Meltwater Pulse 1B, around 11,500 years ago, added another 10 to 15 meters. Around 5,600 BC, the rising Mediterranean breached the Bosphorus land bridge and poured into the Black Sea basin. The Black Sea, previously a smaller freshwater lake, was inundated with saltwater. The saltwater-freshwater transition is clearly documented in the sediment record. The Black Sea coastal shelf, now underwater, was densely habitable land at the time of the event. Neolithic farming communities were established in the region. People were living on those coastlines. We know this because we have found them: submerged settlements, stone tools, hearths, and structural remains on the continental shelves. Off the coast of India, at a depth of 36 meters near the ancient city of Dwarka, a structured underwater site has been mapped and partially excavated. Stone walls, geometric foundations. The site dates to a period when that area was dry land, before the sea rose to cover it. Off the coast of Japan, the Yonaguni Monument, a series of stepped stone terraces at a depth of 5 to 27 meters, remains contested between natural and human formation, but sits on a platform that was above sea level until roughly 10,000 years ago. Off the coast of northwest India, surveys of the Gulf of Cambay have identified what appear to be urban-scale structures at depths of 30 to 40 meters, dated by recovered artifacts to potentially 9,500 years ago. None of these sites are conclusively identified as pre-flood cities, but all of them are evidence that the continental shelves, now underwater, were inhabited, and the inundation of those shelves by rising seas following the end of the Ice Age was a real and traumatic historical event for the people who lived through it. Here is a number that should stop you. More than 200 independent flood traditions have been documented across world cultures, not retellings of each other, genuinely independent traditions from cultures that had no historical contact. The Sumerian epic of Gilgamesh, the Babylonian Atrahasis epic, the Hebrew account of Noah, the Hindu story of Manu, the Greek story of Deucalion, the Norse Bergelmir, the Aztec Coxcox, the Hopi flood traditions of North America, the Dreamtime flood stories of Aboriginal Australia. Across these traditions, consistent elements appear again and again. A single righteous individual or family warned of the coming flood, the building of a vessel or finding of refuge on high ground, the survival of animals, a bird sent out to find land, a covenant or promise made by the divine figure responsible that it would not happen again, a rainbow, a sign, a mark. These are not vague similarities. The specific narrative elements, the warning, the vessel, the bird, the covenant, appear across traditions separated by oceans and millennia. There are 3 possible explanations. All of these cultures independently invented an identical story from scratch. They all share a common literary ancestor, the Mesopotamian texts, which spread globally through cultural contact. Or They all share a common memory of the same real event. For the Mesopotamian diffusion theory to account for the Aboriginal Australian flood traditions, which are the oldest continuous oral traditions on Earth, the story would have to have traveled from Mesopotamia to Australia before the Aboriginal traditions were established. That is not how diffusion works. The traditions predate the contact, which leaves options 1 and 3. Part 1 of this episode has been about the physical record. The ice cores, the impact layer, the sea level rise, the submerged sites, the drowned coastlines, the extinctions. The scientific evidence is not in dispute. A major catastrophic event occurred approximately 12,900 years ago. It was followed by a prolonged cold period that ended with rapid warming and a sea level rise of 120 meters that drowned the edges of the inhabited world. The geological case is made. The flood happened, the sea levels rose, the coastlines drowned. Part 2 asks a different question. Not what happened, but what was living on those drowned coastlines when it happened? Whether any of it was more sophisticated than a Neolithic fishing village. Whether the flood traditions are preserving a memory of something that went under, not just water, but an entire chapter of human history that we are only now beginning to find the tools to look for. More than 200 cultures remembered it. The survivors did not just survive. Some of them went somewhere. Some of them built something. Some of them wrote it down. The texts are in Part 2, and so are the underwater sites. At Göbekli Tepe and at 100 other sites we haven't yet found. And so are the questions that mainstream archaeology has not yet fully answered. Part 2 drops next. We go underwater. We look at Dwarka, Yonaguni, the Gulf of Cambay, and Plato's Atlantis. And we ask the question this series has been building toward since episode 4. Was there a pre-flood civilization sophisticated enough to leave a record?
Thanks for watching Unburied Remnants. If you like this content, please like, share, and subscribe to help support the channel. Stay curious, keep digging.